Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this episode of the Adopt 365 podcast. If you're not already subscribed, recommend that you subscribe in your favourite podcast app and also give it a like and a comment. It really does matter to us. I'd like to introduce my co-host to the podcast. First of all, Anthony Charman.
Hello.
Megan Warren.
Hi, everyone.
And finally, and not least, we've got a special co-host today. I'd like to introduce Mark Smith from Milsted Langdon.
Hello.
So today's podcast is all about the real lived experience of Microsoft Teams rooms. Now we're in this hybrid world with some people in the office, some people at home. We're trying to find what the new normal looks like. We're seeing people that are complaining that when they've come back into the office, it actually worked a lot better when they were at home. So we've kind of flipped where we were previously during lockdown. So we see a lot more people now considering what they need to be doing with their meeting rooms and their spaces in the office to make sure that the new normal actually works and we can actually be productive. But before we get on with that, let's do the one thing that we do every week. So we'll start with Megan. What's the one thing that you've been focusing on or looking on recently?
So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was one of the new features that I've noticed in Microsoft Teams, which is all around how you view your chat messages now. So if you go in your settings underneath where you can set like dark theme, light theme, ultra high definition theme, whatever it is, you can now change the chat density. So you can have it as comfy, I think is what they call it, which is the traditional, your words are in a box and then underneath my words are in a box and it shows you that. Or you can have it as compact, which literally says the name and then has the wording. So it's very compact, I guess, and that's why they've called it compact. So you see a lot more of the chat in your screen. For me, though, and I know Anthony started using it, for me, though, I did set it and I just didn't like it. When you've got like those small group chats, it just looks really messy. You can't really define who said what. So yeah, I haven't set it. However, there may be use cases if you like that sort of smaller chat, you want it to be more compact, you can have it there. So completely up to you. The other thing that I've been working on recently and focusing on is Teams calling. So been doing some projects around training for Teams calling, and just love the simplicity that it brings people when it all comes into Teams, because we spend so much time on Teams now. Having that calling feature throughout there as well just makes it a lot easier. So yeah, chat density and Teams calling for me.
Brilliant, fantastic there, Megan. Sounds like there's a new feature which you hate, and that's what you want to tell everyone else, so it's all good. I suppose those people that have been coming from Slack or are used to more sort of traditional chat methods, things like, is it IRC chat channels and stuff like that, that more condensed view was quite normal in those kind of platforms. Anthony, what was your one thing?
So I noticed something that our marketing team had put on LinkedIn the other day about kind of how to improve life, kind of working from home. My wife's always saying to me, "What are you doing? Just sat in that office all day long?" And you know, she says it's not good for you. And I was thinking about this, and the article came up, and it just had a few key things that I've taken on board, which is, you know, remember to take a break. You know, get away from what you're doing every so often, so you're not just sat there meeting after meeting. And that takes me back to one of my old favorites in Teams, in that you can set it to say, when I'm, you know, when I'm trying to book an hour meeting, just make it a 55-minute meeting, so I'm not going back to back into meetings. Get some fresh air as well, you know, go for a wander. Change location in the house, which you know, I'm lucky enough to be able to have a couple of little places where I can work from. But I do miss my big monitors when I'm working from another location. So I just wondered the other day whether there's going to be a trend towards people having larger screens on laptops, because as soon as I moved to my laptop, I realized just how tiny the screen is on that. And just build a routine. Make sure that you've got a routine where you're building in breaks between meetings. You're doing something different every so often, so it doesn't become a day sat in front of a screen. You know, and that does, I know it does have an impact on me when I find I've been sat here all day. The sign that I've had a bad, you know, a busy day and a bad day is probably that at 4 o'clock in the afternoon I'll walk past the front door and it's not been opened yet. So yeah, it's always good to get outside and to do things. So that was just one thing I looked at. If you do follow us on LinkedIn, you'll be able to find those tips, and they're really, really useful.
Brilliant. Thank you there, Anthony. And obviously keep an eye on Viva Insights as well to see what your working habits are and things like that as well. But definitely those things are just getting outside. Contemplating whether I should make one of my Teams meetings a meeting where we encourage people, they don't need their camera on, just put your AirPods in and go for a walk out while we're doing it, kind of thing, or something like that. But
Yeah,
got
I've
to get the
just
mix right.
just remembered another one of those, which is connect. Just spontaneously phone connect with some of your colleagues. It's very easy just to spend the whole day going through talking, with people about work-related stuff. But just reach out and say, "How are you? How are you doing?" Etc. That's another one that came up on that list of things to improve your working from home balance.
Definitely. We'll make sure we link to that below somewhere in our podcast notes and in the YouTube notes as well. So, Mark, what's the one thing that you're doing at Milsted that's maybe been useful to you guys recently?
I think one thing similar to what Megan was saying earlier is you get information overload on a lot of the areas and teams. So it's quite nice that they're starting to bring out ways that you can actually condense the amount of information that you've got and whatnot. And as we start using Teams more and more, it becomes more obvious. So I think it's a fairly new feature that's in there where you can actually filter your chat messages. So instead of seeing a massive list of all your meetings and also your chats and also any app messages, if you just want to concentrate on some of the chats that you're having, just simply change the filter at the very top and you can just see a list of all the recent chats. It just makes you that little bit more focused on what's in there rather than just seeing this mass of words, which whether you love the new compact view as well or not, it will then let you see a little bit more of the content, I think.
Definitely, really good tip there. So much going on inside Teams now. One of the things that I also make sure I do is pin a chat that I'm in regularly. So I'm in a few kind of more social chats. So rather than having it in a team, we just do it in a chat. And I've pinned those to the top because those are the ones that you very quickly forget about because they go down and down the chat list. And actually, they're the ones that maybe I should just be igniting every now and then to make sure that they're still going through. So that's a really good one, Mark. Thanks for sharing. So the one for me is it's not a new feature that I've seen come in yet inside Outlook, but it's something I've been seeing has been being spoken about, and this is all about that hybrid working, sort of working from home. Are you going to be in the office? So the two features that I've seen coming to Outlook are, first of all, for you to set the days that you're going to be in the office, and second is when you accept a meeting invite, you're able to say whether you're going to attend that meeting in person or via Microsoft Teams. So whichever ones of those are, it just gives people a little bit more clarity as to what's going on from that perspective. So that's our one things. We've gone around the room. So let's go into the kind of the full subject that we're going to be talking about, all about Teams rooms. And Mark, if you don't mind, without giving away kind of all of that we're going to be talking about today, do you want to kind of just update people on the process that you've been going for? It's been a busy sort of beginning to the year for you and the team at Milsted Langdon.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done a full office refurbishment in our Taunton office. So it wasn't just a lick of paint. This was everyone out of the entire office, both floors. Walls came down, the whole shooting match, windows replaced. It was a big old project, and an interesting time to do it, obviously, because I think we started it sort of later part of or mid to late part of last year, and we didn't quite know, or no one really knew, what is the new modern way of working. Obviously, the buzz of hybrid working and all those sorts of things. So we had to go and undertake a lot of work to try to work out what different areas are needed for the various parts of the business and how are we going to work, which obviously involved meeting rooms, huddle spaces, the whole shooter match, without really necessarily knowing how people are going to use it, because it's obviously all changing at the minute. So it was an exciting project, a really good one to get our teeth into, because you could actually see a physical thing. So many things in IT, you get a bit of software or a process that's happening at the end, which you can get some massive efficiencies out of it, but it's not quite as exciting as seeing a nice bright orange lamp in the corner of a room and some nice bits and pieces along the way, and also the technology that can go into the rooms as well. So it's been a really nice project. We've got people in the office now very regularly. It's a lot more people in the office now making full use of it.
Fantastic. Sounds like a good, exciting project. We've been on a similar project at Computer World, but not quite to the same extent. We've been kind of refreshing things around the office whilst we were away and when we've got back. And we've just literally got all of our Microsoft Teams room demo gear that has been traveling customers around the UK over the last few months and installed it in all our rooms now. So we've got more of a demo facility now rather than a bunch of demo equipment.
I'm sure my fingerprints are all over those. I think you probably sent all of those my way over the last year or so.
Definitely. So let's dig into the subject. So maybe Anthony, do you want to kick us off with sort of personas, the different types of rooms and things like that a little bit, and what are the things that you've been seeing and things that people should be considering?
So yeah, I've been working with quite a few clients, looking at how they should adopt hybrid working, how they can use the technology to do that. And one of the things the common things that comes out is you've got to think through each of the scenarios that people are going to be using them in. Whether it's going to be an individual coming into the office and wanting to take part in a Teams meeting with someone, with people from other organizations, where it's 3 or 4 people coming in who want to host that meeting for other people, or whether it's a conference room, or whether it's a training room. And there's just lots and lots of different ways in which we're seeing these rooms needing to be configured to support these types of scenarios. So one of the first kind of things I would say is if you're talking to your staff about coming into the office more often, or if you're demanding that they're coming into the office, that you provide those different facilities for them, and think through each of the different use cases that you may have. I think, Mark would probably agree with me. Some of those things that we talked through work really, really well. Other things we've learnt lessons from and have to modify those, especially for the smaller group rooms.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. It's very much horses for courses, isn't it, on these sorts of things? And you're not going to get it right first time either. And I think you learn once you're in the room how it's going to work a bit better.
Yeah. There's also other things that we've learned about kind of room layouts. Not just thinking about where the cameras are, not just thinking about where the microphones are, but thinking about the acoustics of the room, thinking about the presentation of the room, so that the people who are coming from outside the organization and viewing it are getting a professional view of what's going on. So there's lots and lots of things that you wouldn't initially think about that need to be considered when we start to design the shape and size of Teams rooms.
I think you've kind of got to put your feet into the use cases, haven't you? You've got to consider actually what does your organisation do, what are the interaction points, and certainly when we did this at Computer World, there were a few different use cases that we thought about. The first was the typical large board room meeting, people sat around a table with people joining us remotely. The second, one thing that we do quite a lot at Computer World, and part of our history is in sort of training, is more where you're hosting a training session. Either everybody is remote, but you've got a presenter that wants to come in to use the facilities, or where you've got a hybrid where there's some people in a training room and there's some people remote. So it's a completely different use case to people all sat down. Ultimately, the camera needs to be in a completely different place. In your typical meeting room, the camera is at the front looking at the attendees. In a training room, typically the camera is at the back or at the side and looking at the presenter. So it's kind of looking at those two different use cases. Other ones that we then commonly see are things like huddle rooms, where you might have 3, maybe 4 people, might also be called a small meeting room, and then focus rooms, maybe one person joining a meeting with a little bit of they just want a bit of focus. They just want to be able to get in the space on their own and be immersed in the meeting. I don't know, Mark, what you saw from the scenarios that you thought about, and then sort of realistically, when all the rooms have been released, what is the difference?
Well, we try to create all of those sorts of spaces that we've all talked about, and that I think we all know probably exist. Some of them are used a lot more than what we thought, and some of them I would say are used a lot less. One area that we wanted to try to get was similar to like you were just saying, that little area where you want some alone time. You might want to be able to do the video call, but you want to be able to get away from the office. So we created a number of different areas for it. So we have got bookable offices in the main areas, which haven't got any Teams rooms. They've got Teams panels on the outside, so they can book the room. quite strict instructions. This isn't your office, so it's not designed for someone to camp out in it for 3 or 4 weeks and have that as their room. But if you need to go and have that more private conversation or those small group meetings, but you don't need the sort of AV stuff in there. They've gone down really well for a lot of the people who need to go in. Some people are really benefiting from it because even all our partners now and all our senior staff, they haven't got offices at all in our offices now. The only department that has is HR for obvious reasons. So they quite often need to go out into these rooms. But another one that we did was we created meeting booths where it's just three spaces, all sort of in little U's connected to each other, where you can sit in there. There's a monitor there. We get a webcam set up and a bit of lighting. So if you want to go in there and have a video call that's away from your desk, maybe you want it a little bit more professional, maybe, or you don't want people going in the background or worried about any sensitive information that's around. One of the setups that we set up was really good. So it backs up onto a wall, it's away from everyone else, and they've not really been used too much yet, but I can see they possibly will be. One of the other ones that we set up backs on to the office. So you've got the background is actually the main office. So there's not really that much of a benefit going to these rooms other than you're a little bit away than being sat at your desk. So in hindsight, not so sure that's working quite as well as it possibly should. So I think that's one thing we've probably learned from those spaces.
Anthony, is there anything else around sort of personas and considerations that you've got that you want?
No, I mean, I'm interested to ask Mark what's getting used the most. One of the things that I found when I've been going into the office is just pulling my laptop up on a high table somewhere and sharing with someone. But quite often you just think, well, we need the third person in the meeting. We need to reach out to one of the technical guys for a bit of support, and being able to bring them into that situation. So that's been one that you kind of think, is this an appropriate place to do that? And maybe I need to move to do that. But Mark, I know you've done a kind of kitchen area where you've got some areas that people can work. How's that gone down?
Yeah, so we've got the same. We've got the high tables, which in our mind would be heavily used all the time, and I think it is used for maybe sort of more like the projecty type teams that are working together. We'll use it quite a bit in IT because we're interacting with the different departments, and maybe some of the smaller project teams within the firm will use those quite a bit. But it is very much a case of you go there either with your laptop or just by yourselves and chat. There is no screen there. There's a little power supply. I think there's probably 2 plugs or something like that if someone needs it for a little bit longer. It is getting use, but it's probably not quite as much as I thought. But yeah, one of the areas that I like probably the most is our breakout area. So we've got a nice, lovely kitchen, fantastic coffee machine, which is obviously the most important part of the entire refit. But to the side of that, there's a bit more of a relaxed seating area with the high table. But we've also got a 70-inch telly on the wall that comes out on a swing arm. So that area can be used for that collaborative space where you just want to chat a bit more relaxed than in the office because it's away from everyone else. So if you do want to have those conversations that might be a bit louder, a little bit of debate maybe, but you still want to be in a relaxed environment, that's great. But if you then also want to bring up some content on the screen, like you're saying, you've got a massive telly there to be able to do it. And the reason we've got on a swing arm as well is we can then open up the entire kitchen breakout space. So if we're doing a less formal presentation, what we'll do is we'll do it in there. We'll have the screen up behind us. You've got a HDMI cable to plug into it, or it's Samsung, so you just cast straight to it. And it just feels more relaxed. It's less formal. You're not going into a meeting room. And we've done it for a few sessions where we've been asking the staff for feedback. So we're doing quite a big project at the minute to try to understand where we use data, how we use data, and what processes we're following for it. And we want to hear from the more junior members of staff because they're the people at the coalface, but they might be a little bit more hesitant to maybe raise their voice in a more formal, structured sort of boardroom style setup. But they're there, sat down. We got some sandwiches in, some coffee, some drinks, and it was a very, very two-way conversation with everyone, and it was so much more relaxed, which I don't think we'd have got if it was in a more formal meeting room, to be honest.
I think what I have noticed when you were talking about all those different areas and about the sort of pod areas is we've got a couple Nook pods, I think they're called, in our office. Um, and when they were implemented, everyone loved them. Now we've got those different types of rooms. I see them being used less, I would say. People go into the more sort of structured rooms where they have the whole team set up. And I did go in there the other week with someone I was working with, and when I realised there was no second screen, so we couldn't share the content we were looking at in that sort of area, at that point it didn't work for what we needed it to do. We either had to turn our laptops around, which is never a great way to work, or we had to join a Teams meeting with each other just to share our screen. And I think things like that now coming back into it, if we looked at those Nook pods now, we'd probably put a screen in there and people can either use it for their social lunch, which people sometimes do, or those meetings. But for the moment, they don't tend to work for those sort of meetings unless you are just having a chat and you don't need to share anything. But it's amazing that something that worked 18, 24 months ago, now we're in a completely different world and you're like, no, that doesn't work now. And it's just completely flipped everything on its head, hasn't it?
Yeah. I'll tell you one of the things I've noticed more being in the office is that I'm moving around more. So prior to COVID, I would have come into the office. I've got kind of work from home sometimes and then work from the office other times, but I would just go and sit in what I consider to be my desk and I would spend the day there, and I might go off to a meeting room once during the day for a large meeting. But now I'm thinking about the meeting I'm going to have and choosing the right place to go for it, whether it be up to, sit on the high table because I've just got a colleague coming to work alongside me, or going to one of our webinar rooms or Teams rooms, because I've got a more formal customer meeting and I've got a couple of people from Computer World and I've got 4 or 5 people from the client. So I'm actually choosing the room based on, and the location based on the meeting that I'm having. And that's where, for me, the Teams panels have come in, because I can go and just, see if there's a room free and go to there and book it. So I think that's pretty good for me from moving around more in the office rather than being sat in the same chair all day. But also, I'm thinking about the type of meeting I'm going to have and then booking the location for it, which is good. I don't know if other people have found that.
I've definitely been using the different rooms for the different purposes, kind of thing, and trying to get those different experiences in. I think that everything everyone's been saying is definitely things that need to be considered. I think if you're just going back to your office and you're putting Teams rooms in your existing meeting rooms, you're missing an opportunity there to do something slightly different, do something that's going to work. I'm seeing meeting rooms in some organizations get smaller because you might have used to have very large meeting rooms that you're just not populating anymore, that you could chop in half or even into 3 and have more collaborative areas that you could be using. There's definitely also a trend to put a breakout area near a meeting room. So where you have a meeting room, you might chop it into 2/3 of it could be the meeting room, and then the 1/3 it could be a sofa area. So outside the meeting room, there's a less formal place that you could take your breaks, but still kind of interact in a less formal way near the meeting room, and things like that. So there's lots to be considered.
And that's something that we definitely found, Barry, the size of the rooms, because we used to have the grand boardroom, if you will, which was one of the traditional 2 meeting rooms where you can take out the dividing wall and have it as one big one. But we opted intentionally for more smaller rooms because we thought we're going to use those so much more often. If we need to get 30 people in a room, we'll go over and get a room at a conference room for the few times we need to do it, and it's worked fine so far.
Definitely. So just to move us on a little bit then, so we spoke about the rooms, the different types of rooms, but there's obviously lots of sort of technical considerations, whether it's what type of hardware, whether it's Windows versus Android, whether it's where does the camera need to go, whether it's about audio, microphones, and things like that. So Mark, those kind of technical audio visual type considerations, what were the things that you did consider? Obviously you worked with us to look at various different units and figure out what would work, but what were the kind of lessons that you learned and the things you implemented?
I think probably the biggest lesson was there's a lot more to it than you think, and like I think we've already said, there's a lot more to it than the tech as well. And yeah, you can get the absolute best camera and all those bits and pieces, but unless you take the whole experience into consideration, you're going to fail. And it is putting yourself in that seat as a member of staff who's going to come in and they don't want to think, they just want to rock up to this room and click, I'm in a meeting room, have it as a really slick, easy experience. And there's always going to be those quirks that all of the various solutions have got, but you just want it simple. And it's those more challenge or sort of the simplest things that sometimes the most challenging things. Sort of getting the audio right, the simplest thing of have a beanbag in the corner or have the acoustic softening on the ceiling. It makes such a massive difference, and I don't think we've got it right yet. Still, especially in our smaller rooms, I think we've definitely underestimated how much you need to deal with for the audio, even in the smaller rooms. So I don't think you can expect to get it right first time. You've got to be ready to make these small little tweaks along the way, I think.
I think getting I was going to say getting the audio right is really important, because I don't want to spend all day wearing a headset, which is what the mode that I tend to have moved into at home. There's something really liberating about being able to take your headset off and just be able to talk. I find myself wandering around the house, and it'll be well into the evening before I realise I haven't taken my headset off yet. So it's just nice to be able to take it off and be able to talk normally, and be able to hear normally, and for people to be able to know that I can hear them well, and there's no echo and there's no problems at all. So it's really important to spend a bit of time planning the audio and thinking about reflections around the room as well.
Definitely. I think we've got some customers that have got very nice meeting rooms, but they've got hard floors and very kind of harsh glass walls and things like that, and they look absolutely beautiful. But in this day and age where audio and hearing people and echo is so part of it, you've got to consider those soft furnishings and the ability to be able to stop the echo, stop the reverberation of things like that. So Megan, you've got some thoughts about video?
Yeah, definitely. So, whilst I think the audio is incredibly important, obviously, I'm also somebody that interacts, engages with meetings a lot better when you can see the other people. And the worst thing is when you do join and there's sort of 10 people in the meeting room and you're joining virtually and you can only see 3 of them. You have to have it so that you can see everybody in that room, so that you feel engaged with everybody in that meeting. So that if you're a virtual attendee, you engage with everybody, but also if you are in the meeting room as well, making sure you can see the person correctly if they've got their camera on. And I think when I've spoken to Mark before, something quite crucial to talk about was the camera angles. When you set them up, you don't want it facing up above everyone. You want it to be at everyone's eye level, so that you feel like they are looking into the camera, looking at you. But also not at the right level, that it's facing the wrong way when people walk in a room or anything like that. We don't want it pointing at the wrong things. So I think for me, the video sort of aspect of this is as equally as important as the audio, because even if I can hear you, if I'm looking at the floor or looking at your feet, I'm not going to engage with that. It needs to be the right camera as well. And then the other thing I'd talk about, which isn't necessarily about the tech, is about lighting. And I think we've seen this a bit more recently around people have put in these lovely bright lights that when you walk in, you think, wow, this looks really fresh. After 20 minutes of sitting in a room with lights that bright, you get a headache or your eyes start to strain, etc. I think little things like that are quite important, just to make it a bit more friendly and a bit more realistic as to what people can deal with as well.
And I think on that bit about making sure you don't get eye strain in the rooms, I mean, you guys have been to our office as well, and the meeting rooms look absolutely stunning, but we have got a really nice wood front wall where the TVs are, and it's got wooden slats. It looks absolutely fantastic and works really well for some of the softening of the audio as well, because it's got felt in there as well. But if you are staring at it for a long period of time, the lines do start waving a little bit. And if you walk into a room or you see the artistic drawings, amazing, fantastic, if you're in there for a little bit. But you do notice that you kind of got to look away a little bit, otherwise it kind of turns into one of these magic eye pictures in the background a little bit, which isn't the best. But But also to pick up on the camera angle bit as well, one thing that we noticed in our other offices that have, well, they were set up probably 5 years ago for the cameras. We thought a lot about what the camera angle, what we didn't necessarily think about was where someone's going to be sat or stood when they start or finish the meeting. So we've got, same as most of the setups, you've got your camera and your device of some description to start the meetings. But for you to then go up and stop the meeting, the camera is then, depending on the height of the person, looking at not necessarily the best angle for the person walking up to the touch device. So you don't really think about that because you think of how is everything going to look when the meeting is happening and when everyone sat down at the desk. But there is that very short period that at the end of a meeting, that could be the only thing that someone remembers, because it could be a really unflattering angle that you go up to when you click end call.
Definitely, yeah. Sorry, I couldn't get the unmute button there quick enough. Yeah, some really good considerations there. I think maybe I'll just run everyone through the various different parts that make up a Teams room, because you've got a number of different options when it comes to the technology. I think the first thing to consider is whether it's Windows or whether it's Android. Those are the two flavors that are available. The Windows solutions have been around for a lot longer, more mature, maybe in terms of features and functionality, and have typically got the updates quicker in the past. We're starting to see more Android-based solutions come out there, which are more of an appliance. They're kind of all the computers built into them. You don't need a separate computer in there, as well as a camera and things like that. They tend to be built into what looks like a TV bar that you might have under your television. Now, typically they have been a little bit further behind on features and functionality, and maybe don't get the updates as quick. But what we're now seeing is actually some of the features coming to the Android solutions quicker. I think we're probably going to see more devices move over to the Android side of things as time goes by. Microsoft haven't committed either way. They're investing in both platforms. But that certainly is something to consider. The Windows solutions tend to have more components, which means more cables. Does mean a little bit more flexibility and freedom as to how and where you mount all of those different components. So that's something to consider. Typically, you will also have an in-room controller, so a small 7-8 inch tablet that sits somewhere inside the room, and that's what you can use to hang up on a meeting, to be able to spotlight people in a meeting, to be able to mute people. So you want to think about where you're placing that. In some rooms, you might just have it off to one side. Other rooms where you're going to want to maybe a bit more interaction. So you might want to start one of the front row features. This is the ability to kind of change the layout and things like that. It can be quite useful to have that somewhere in the room where someone that's managing the meeting is able to see who's in the meeting, to be able to control what's going on inside there. You obviously need to think about the camera. Some of these units have got the camera built in to the core of it. We need speakers and we need microphones, and all of these things will depend on the layout as to where you're going to be putting them together. And then outside the room, Microsoft makes something called a Teams panel, which we'll come to a little bit later on, but ultimately shows you what's going on inside that room and allows you to book that room for ad hoc integrations. Anthony, is there anything else that you wanted to add around the kind of hardware setup and the audio camera functionality, etc.?
I think the audio bit is an interesting one, because in a lot of cases we can rely on the kind of soundbar approach units to project the audio into the room. But if the room gets any bigger, if you've got a bigger room, then we've got a couple of options. We can use almost like a traditional conference phone as an audio repeater, so like a spider phone. We work quite a lot with Poly, and we can use the Poly and telephone sets to reinforce the audio. Or if it is a bigger room and a bigger conference room or a training room, then using some separate speakers in the ceiling to reinforce that audio is an option as well. But that just needs to be really carefully planned to make sure that you get good coverage, and that similarly, if you're using room-based microphones as well, that they're of a good quality, so you can get those units to work together to provide a really good audio experience.
Definitely. I think we're also starting to see new types of Teams rooms. So there's a new manufacturer out there called Neat. We've just got one of their products in the office. So they make very large interactive screens. They've got some very clever technology in them. It allows you to kind of, if you're in a room with 6 people, it is able to capture each of those people inside the room and put each of those feeds into a separate feed inside Microsoft Teams. So it allows people to have a different experience, a more inclusive experience inside those meeting rooms, as well as having a very high quality panel with a pen to be able to do really good interactive whiteboarding. But that same company also has smaller Teams room solutions that are almost just like a portrait tablet that is able to sit in a Nook pod or something like that. So it's a more of a one-to-one Teams meeting room experience. We'll move on to the booking process. So Mark, I know you've been looking recently about how is the best way for Teams rooms to be booked in your environment and things like that.
Yeah, I think again back to some of the bits that I was saying earlier. You just want it simple was what we wanted to do to start off with. So we went for the room panel outside the door, which is the same resource as the Teams room, which is the same resource as the room. So previously, it might have been a case of you go to Outlook, you'll book your meeting with everyone else, book your room, but then you'd have to forward the invite to the video conference unit, or someone would have to join it from within the room and invite the video conference in, which to be fair worked fairly well, but it's not the nicest, it's not the smoothest experience. So now that we've got the full rooms ecosystem where someone can rock up and just tap on the rooms panel to say, right, I want this room for the next 20 minutes, hour, 2 hours, whatever it is, and that then automatically updates Outlook, and everyone knows you can't have it. There's a big red flag on it outside the room, so you know exactly what's available. You can see what's there for the rest of the day, which is fantastic on the room, rather than having to go back to your Outlook or going to the receptionist and go, Jane, have I got a room that's available for us? Which is, to be fair, I was as guilty as that, if not more than everyone else in our place previously. So that's making the ad hoc things a lot easier. And we've made sure every single one of our rooms has got one of the panels on there, even if it's not got a full Teams room. So the rooms that might just have a monitor in there that's used for, your quiet space, or when you need to work in a very small team, that's still got a panel on there, which works really well. And the bit that we're trying to work out a little bit more now is how we can present that in a much easier, user-friendly way to see across the entire office, because we've got, I'm not sure how many rooms we've got, 15, 20 rooms, whatever it might be, in our Taunton office. That's a lot of rooms for you to be able to see in one interface. So we're just trying to make that a little bit easier, or because Outlook gets a little bit too bogged down with all that information, whilst maybe the someone on reception's trying to look, or you're trying to look. Obviously, you can use reservations and you can use scheduling within Outlook, which is fantastic for when you're booking it, but it's just that visual piece. So the rooms panel has definitely made a very big difference. We just want to now see if we can get that big pane of glass to see, right, these are all the rooms that are available. Let's see what's happening. But so far, moving to a full rooms ecosystems, it's been night and day for how easy it is to manage it, I'd say.
Definitely. I think kind of keeping it simple makes life a lot easier. There are other room booking systems that are available, and if you do have specific needs, like the ability to book a lunch directly from the rooms panel or something like that, then certainly the vanilla solutions aren't the right way to go. But we find for most customers the vanilla solution, something like the Yale-Link panels outside the rooms, just make life that much easier. And one of the features I'm looking forward to that should be coming any day now is the ability to check into your meeting outside the room. So this will mean that people book meeting rooms and people book recurring meetings in meeting rooms and then don't turn up to them. So all the features and functionality are there now behind the scenes to set what should happen. Do people need to check into the room? If they don't check in within 15 minutes, should the room get freed up, etc.? All those are there, and I've got some customers that say that the panels are now offering that check-in functionality on the panels as well. I'm not seeing that on our panels at the moment, but different tenants get different things at different times. So the ability to be able to check into the room to free up the room is something that I'm really looking forward to there. And of course, I think, as you said, Mark, the ability to be able to just walk up to a room, see if it's free now, go, oh, I need to just do a meeting in here, I'm going to book it out for 30 minutes, an hour to stop that happening is really useful. The other thing that I have found useful is using your mobile phone as a way of being able to book the meeting rooms and to be able to see what else is going on there, to be able to share your content inside the room. And one more thing before I put it back to the room, I don't know if people have seen that the ability to cast from your laptop into a room has started to creep in there. So I noticed on Friday that in Microsoft Teams, if you click the free ellipsis at the top and you're in the public beta stream or the public preview stream, you now get the ability to cast from your laptop to the room without having to join a Teams meeting or to plug in a HDMI cable or something like that as well.
Yeah, it popped up on mine this morning as well. Yeah.
So it's obviously coming out very quickly. So before we move on to training, then anything else with sort of that booking process? And I think it's something that you do need to educate the users a little bit, and we'll come on to that in a moment. But it is something that generally we just want to keep it as easy as possible. So let's move on to training then. I don't know, Megan, if you've got any thoughts and opinions you want to give us on this. I mean, ultimately this should be simple, really, but any thoughts on the ways to kind of inform the users as to the changes and how things would work?
Yeah, so I think looking back at the traditional way that people used to train, and I will put quotation marks around the word train there, when it was like how to use the meeting rooms, is they used to print off a step-by-step instruction thing. They laminated it because that made it really professional, and then they left it on the table, and they would just expect people to walk in, read this laminated sheet, which constantly moved as to where it was in the room, so you could never find it anyway, and just know how to use it. That doesn't work because whilst it is simple, the way you do it may be different. You may have to share your screen. You may want to spotlight people. All those little things that make your meeting more productive need to be shown to those users. So the way that I think we found is probably the best way is just short training videos that I'm joining this meeting. This is how I would do it. I'm spotlighting someone in a meeting. This is how I would do it. It's not necessarily a big bang 1 hour, 2 hour long training session, but just those bite-sized things that they can watch. And once you've done it a couple times, you know it then, you know how it works. But I definitely would say don't go back to leaving that piece of paper laminated on the table because it's not the way to do it. People need to be shown how to do it. And especially with those panels outside the rooms, the worst thing is forgetting to train people on how to use those. They walk in, think they've got the meeting room booked because they're in there physically, and then someone else comes in and halfway through your meeting they go, I've got this room booked, and then you have to do the awkward, oh, I'm just going to be 5 minutes whilst I find another place. So it's just little things thinking about that whole journey from how do I book it, what do I need to do there, how do I enter, how do I share, and then all that process. I just make sure you work that out, almost make like a what do they do when you have a comic book like that sort of storyboard. Have a storyboard, make sure you thought about every part of the process, and then create the content for that in a way that people will watch it, look at it, read it, not just leaving it in a room and expecting them to know themselves.
I think it's one of those things that is also quite. I'm not sure I'm going to say this word right, but experiential. That if you have got a new facility, Mark, like you have, doing tours of it and kind of showing it to small groups or something like that. What did you find, Mark? And this is where we're going to find. Mark says the best thing is laminated pieces of papers in the room.
Well, if you were kind of describing our office before the refit, to be honest, those laminated pieces of paper, they looked really official, but yeah, they were covered in a lot of dust. So we were very surprised how quickly, and also some of the types of people who just embraced it straight away. So when we were quite lucky, it was a whole office refit, so everyone was out of the office. And then day one, when we opened it up, we said, okay, half the office can come in today because we knew there'd be tech problems and all that sort of stuff for people working. And then later in the week, the other half can come in. And my team were there sort of trying to deal with, oh, this cable wasn't plugged in, or what do I do for here? And looking around the rooms, and there are 3 or 4 meeting rooms that were red, and people had booked the meeting room out, and they just did it. And some of these people who did just do it, I wouldn't have expected them to have just done it. So I think that has sort of proven that you don't need War and Peace now to do it. You just need that really, really quick, like Megan said, 2-minute video, an actual video of you walking up, clicking on a button, going in, or walking into a room and clicking the button on the touchscreen to say join the meeting. show them what that experience is, because a lot of people, especially some of the people who aren't quite as happy with tech, they could get scared by a lot of these things because there's lots of stuff happening. But once they realize just how simple these things are to use now, once they've done it once, they're just going to keep doing it. And I think actually on the back of this, I don't think we've done enough. So I think we probably just need to go away and do that quick little video and get people to see it live. We do try, well, by the nature of how everyone's working, a lot of our meetings are obviously hybrid now with people in the office or at home. So they are experiencing it a lot. And whenever we are in meeting rooms, we're using quite a lot of the tech anyway. So I think they're learning it by osmosis, but you can't rely on that. So yeah, I think those little short 1-minute video, here's how you join a meeting, it's the way to go for it.
Definitely. Thanks for sharing them, Mark. So, as we're kind of getting towards the end of the podcast here, I know we've got some hard times to stop. Mark, any other experiences or pitfalls that you found once maybe the rooms were in or during the installation that you just want to share with people? Because I'm aware, Mark, you've probably got to drop off soon while we just finish up.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the cabling's a nightmare anyway, let's face it. But some of the things that we did find was making sure you've got the right types of cable for the right cable run as well. So especially HDMI. HDMI is it's more fickle than a lot of people think and give it credit for. So if you've got a long HDMI run of 10, 15 meters, you are going to lose a hell of a lot of video quality on that. So you need to make sure you get a really high quality, potentially boosted HDMI cable that's going to be able to actually provide that video. And a couple of our rooms didn't. So we had the cables put in by, the guys doing the electrics were fantastic, but that they're not audio visual guys. The HDMI cable is a HDMI cable in their eyes. And you'd plug it in and you'd be getting the purple lines across the screen, or it'd flick in, flick out. We'd go and look at it as IT, and obviously it would work perfect, as things always do when IT look at it. Swapped it out for these bigger, thicker cables, and perfect straight away. So it's definitely don't skimp on those audio cables. That's also those video cables, that's for sure. And make sure that they're really easily available for people to connect into. The little pods that pop up in the middle of the desks. Yes, if we can cast it, it's so much better. Yes, if we can do this, it's so much easier. But nothing beats a hardwired audio cable and a hardwired network cable, just in case you need it from the middle of the desk. Some of our smaller rooms, the desks that we've got in them haven't got them in, and you can tell the difference. So you've got to run the cables up and around, up the middle bit. The cables aren't quite in the right place. You go into the rooms that have got them coming out of the middle, it looks so much slicker, so much easier. We did look at ClickShare and things like that as well, which I think it's so seamless for people who use that. Another thing that we saw in a few of the meeting rooms where places were setting up with, instead of a remote control, have one of the remote control units on the walls that are hardwired into the TV, because it's hard enough to find a remote control at home, let alone a remote control that's in a building that's got 10 meeting rooms. Which remote control is it? Whereas if you've got a little control unit on the wall that does power, source, and volume, what more do you need? That remote cannot go walking. Keep them for when you want to watch the rugby on it or whatever it is as well, if you need to. But for the important stuff, day to day, they seem really, really slick and just stop that thing from going walking, really. So yeah, those are some of the bits that we found were a little bit more awkward than we expected. And lighting, again, I suppose, like Megan said earlier on, our old meeting rooms had a massive window behind that had a white blind, and it was huge. And one of our meeting rooms has it even bigger than that, and it is absolutely silhouetted. Our Yeovil office at the minute's got it's really nice, loads of glass. But if it's a really bright sunny day towards the end of the day where the sun's coming down, everyone is a shadow. You really can't see them, and it doesn't matter how much light you pump into that room. It's still going to be too light. So if you have got the glass things, make sure you've got your proper blackout blinds so you can get rid of that backlight.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much there, Mark. And Mark, I'm aware you've got to leave us now, but thank you for sharing those experiences with the audience. I suppose if you're listening and you're a Milsted Langdon customer and you want to see what the rooms look like, reach out to Mark and the team and go and see what's going on there. Or if you're looking for a really good accountancy firm that also gets tech, reach out to us and we can put you in touch with the team at Milsted Langdon. But thank you for joining us, Mark. We're going to stay around for just a few more minutes just to share our experiences, and we look forward to having you on the podcast again soon, Mark. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Mark.
So Anthony, so in terms of those real lived experiences, what are some of the things that you've seen when talking to customers?
So I think one of the main things that caught me by surprise was when we were thinking about for one of our clients and also for ourselves about training rooms. One of the one of the things that we didn't realize was that when you're delivering a training course, you really need the camera on you, rather than the camera being at the front of the room and projecting a picture of all the people who are being trained. So for our training room, in another one of our clients, we've chosen to mount the camera at the rear of the room, and therefore it gives a view of the people in the room, but also of the trainer as well delivering that content. Another one is content cameras. So when you're stood in front of a whiteboard, you're clearly, especially in a training room scenario, you're getting in the way of what's being written on the whiteboard. But there is a concept of a content camera, and I know that we've got one of these set up now, which will take a standard whiteboard that you write on, but it will work with the images coming from that. It'll blur the person who stood in front of them or make them transparent, and will enable you to in effect see through them to see that content. So if you are setting up a training room, there's just those two things are just a bit of a tip about how you might you want to do that.
Brilliant, thank you. And Megan, any sort of final thoughts from you?
I think one of them that Anthony and I were talking about was sort of naming of rooms. When we implemented our Teams room, I think we renamed them, and they've been the same names of Osborne, Stanshaw, all of that, for 7, 8, 10 years. And everyone knew which room was which, and then we changed them to have different names that made sense when we were setting the names, but maybe didn't explain why or how, and people didn't seem to understand which room they were booking when they were booking them. And obviously we have the different meeting rooms for different purposes now. So I'd just say, one, make it very clear, and when you are doing the training, make it obvious as to, if you want this type of meeting, this is the name, and people will remember that. So one, naming them correctly, and then two, just making sure people know that what those names are as well. And the other thing I was thinking about is, once you've done the training, and this is something we talk about with all of our clients when we do training, is encourage people to go and test it in a fake meeting, or go and test the technology before you actually join it. Make sure you're comfortable with it before you're joining an actual client meeting or something like that, because the worst thing that's going to happen is, if you've tested it and you get it wrong, you're going to hang up on one of your colleagues. You're not going to hang up on a call with an actual customer or anyone like that. So I would just recommend, once you have it implemented, once you've done the training, just encourage people to go and play with it, test it, because it's better that they do that with each other than anybody else. I think that was it from me.
Fantastic. So I think that's all we've got to say. I think meeting rooms and the technology inside meeting rooms has come an awful long way. And I think people need to stop and think and consider what they need to achieve with the meeting rooms and the technology that's needed inside of them. There's a wide variety of technology available featuring different use cases. But if you jump in and just pick the first room technology to go inside the room, you're really going to be left missing out on the opportunity to rethink how you can improve collaboration, how you can improve the meetings inside your organization. So if anyone did want to see any of the technology in action or anything like that, please reach out to any of the Computer World team, Computer World account managers, or myself, Anthony and Megan. We've got a full demonstration facility, and we work very closely with the likes of Polly and Neat, who also have the ability to demonstrate this technology to you, as well as our fantastic customers like Mark from Milsted Langdon. So thank you ever so much for watching. Just a reminder, if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe to make sure you don't miss out future podcasts. If you have implemented a Teams room yourself, please leave some comments below and let us know what your thoughts, what your experiences were. And equally, if you'd like to join us on a future podcast, please reach out to us for more information. Thank you ever so much for joining us on today's Adopt 365 podcast. We look forward to speaking to you again next month.